know, this Skype session we'll be talking about mental health, and that is because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so the topic for today is how various influences and external actions can have an effect on our mental health. So we will be discussing how our experiences with the environment and with others have shaped us to be the people who we are today, in both negative and positive ways. And hopefully this session will help to alleviate the stigma around mental health and will show us ways in which we can nurture the positive in our lives and be a source of positivity around us as well.
That's a really good lens to put on it, Maribel, because actually one of the things that I wanted to say was culture, I think, plays a big part in acting as a barrier to addressing or acknowledging any sort of mental health discussions. In a place like India, it's definitely getting much, much better now, but people don't want to deal with anything like depression or anxiety or any of those issues because it's like, why do you want me to go to a therapist? Like, I'm not crazy. And it's just so it has to be one extreme or the other. So that's definitely a big barrier culturally.
I kind of want to also kind of piggyback off on that a little bit and reference a psychologist named Dr. Brene Brown. And she's worked extensively on empathy, shame, gratitude, guilt, and those types of feelings, and that's surrounding mental health. And one of our biggest things is talking about how we live in a culture, we live in a society where vulnerability and showing vulnerability is shown as a sign of weakness, when in reality, the more vulnerable you are, the more strength you have, because it challenges you to build your confidence and it challenges you to build your courage. And so I think that this idea, the stigma behind mental health, is also this notion that the more vulnerable we are, the more weakness we are showing, and that roots in its own toxicity, I think, across societies. But the more that we challenge that from a cultural perspective, from a research perspective, I think the more that it'll go down.
Sharing. I actually had to seek help as myself about a year ago, and it was a big move. And talking to everyone's points about vulnerability, about and your point about going to someone and feeling grateful for getting that help, and not expecting so much emotion to be processed in that space. I think it touches on an important barrier, which is the question I want to go back to as well, which is that when do you know when to seek professional help, and how, especially if you're working with others, customers, children and youth, just variety of people that you can work with. What are those indicators, those small red flags, or even the yellow ones, right, before they're even red, that show, okay, you need some maybe a day off, or you need to get extra sleep because you're going through a lot, or you need to maybe speak to someone and have someone just give you advice or at least listen, and then at what stage you seek professional help. And one really helpful way was through a professor at AU. Her name is Rosario, and she taught a course on resiliency, and she shared it was like a spectrum of stressors, and depending on what level a person was, they color coded it. So the stigma was out. Instead of saying like, oh, you need help, and this was actually, I have to go back to find out exactly where they implemented this, but I believe it was for when soldiers are being trained, and they would say, oh, you're yellow right now, so that meant, or I think you're yellow, and so that meant they had to talk about what next steps to take so they can be back at a emotionally stable place, and then the red zone being maybe it's time to seek professional help, or even before the red, maybe the yellow. So that chart was a really helpful way to visualize and to get past that barrier. And maybe there are other things out there that can also take away the stigma, but also help people in leadership roles know when it's time to do what?
Start a day with watching a good video, probably. A few minutes for a meditation to know and understand yourself. Where are you? A self-introspection kind of a thing. Okay. So a little efforts on a daily basis will actually lead you to a point where you can see yourself mentally fit person. So that's all I want to share. Yeah.